we got to this process, and I'm not joking when I tell you it was gone in 2 hours, in 2 sessions. It was gone.
Mhm.
And it's never come back.
Wow.
I speak to other people who are sort of in the trauma space, and they say, oh, well, you need to know how to deal with your triggers and stuff, don't you?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infinite Abilities Podcast. I am your host, Nick Earhart, and we are here to encourage each other to find our own unique abilities. Let's go. All right, everyone. So today I have Harris, and I'm excited about this episode. So let's just jump right into it. Harris, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, my name's Harris. I'm a they them, and I recovered totally from PTSD, and am continuing the work on complex PTSD, and I'm also autistic and ADHD, and have chronic pain and possible hypermobility as well, which I'm currently getting looked at. So lots of challenges and good things, and yeah, I'm really passionate about my trauma work and letting people know about how that works and how they can have that as well.
Awesome. So, I love that we all have a unique story that kind of leads us to where we are. Can you kind of tell us, like, what brought you here? Like you're working on or getting over PTSD. So, what, if you don't mind sharing for the audience, what was that caused PTSD?
Sure. So I just want to preface this by saying that I'm totally okay now, so this is okay for me to share, but I will tread gently just for those people who need the information and don't necessarily, want all of the gory details. So the simple PTSD, I really categorize it as two. My trauma therapist tells me that in psychology they don't look at it in that way, but I don't care. It's my trauma. I'm going to call it what I like.
Yeah.
So the simple PTSD, when we talk about simple PTSD, we think of like that one thing that happened or the couple of times that happened. It's really easy to pinpoint. It could be you got PTSD from a vehicle accident, or, in my case, it was sexual assault. And the first time I was 10, and the second time it was during my teens with an abusive partner. And the third time was a one-off on a date in my 20s. And I knew for a really long time, once I learned what PTSD was, and I couldn't even tell you when that was, but I was like, that's very clearly what I've got. Like it really meets the description. And so, and that was really present for me in a really big way. I mean, I couldn't read like a news headline that was anything to do with sexual assault without kind of like, before I've locked myself in my car and had a panic attack. If people even made reference to it in conversation, I was instantly wanting to run away. And even jokes, like on TV, slapstick comedy is really common for, especially like guys, to get kicked in the nuts and stuff. And even that for me, I was like, this is not funny. I still don't necessarily think it's funny, but all of those things used to kind of really take me back there. I had no defense against what my brain was doing, which was kind of bringing it all up again every time. And I went around all of the traditional routes to sort of, trained counsellors and therapists and doctors. I think I saw psychiatrists at one point. And none of them, I sort of said to them, I was like, what can I do about this? Because this is really debilitating. And they were really confused. They're like, well, do you need to talk about it? I was like, no, I can rationalise. I know it wasn't my fault. I find this a lot with particularly neurodivergent clients and friends, that it's not always, sometimes it is, but it's not always an issue of needing to say it out loud or to rationalize it, we're already there. Because I think a lot of us can be quite logical about that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 28, so it was a couple of years after the last incident, I went to a local therapist that I knew because I was having some anxiety, and I was like, yeah, I've been out of the sort of mental health loop for a while, so I should probably go back in and discuss this. And during the intake, she was like, and what do you want to do about your PTSD? And I was like, well, what is there to do? Because people, when I normally talk about it, people just look really blankly at me. And she said, well, you can get rid of simple PTSD. And I was so surprised. Like, it's something I felt was true, but up until then, nobody had agreed with me. And the fact that she said that, I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Can we do it now? And she was like, well, we have to do a bit of groundwork first. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so by the time...
It's not going to happen just like that.
At that point, if you'd have told me to strip off and dance in the rain, I probably would have done it if it worked. So we got to this process, and I'm not joking when I tell you it was gone in 2 hours, in 2 sessions. It was gone. And it's never come back.
Wow.
You know, I speak to other people who are sort of in the trauma space, and they say, oh, well, you know, you need to know how to deal with your triggers and stuff, don't you? And I'm like, I don't have them anymore. It's possible to not have them anymore. So I'm happy to go into that in a second, but just to kind of continue on the story and the journey. After that, I was like so elated, and I felt like I had my life back. And so I just kind of carried on like, oh, I've done this amazing thing. Like, it's finally gone. It was the first time as an adult or since I was a child that I didn't have this PTSD. So it was really magical. And then slowly over time, I was like, something's still not right. And I had a couple of burnouts and breakdowns and stuff. And it's not unusual if you're neurodivergent to have burnouts, but this was different. There was something that it was emotional rather than just neurological, and something wasn't right. And I went traveling, which I never thought I would do because the thought of that terrified me. And it actually ended up going really well. And then up until the last minute, where I had another breakdown. So I ended up having to come home, back here to England. And I went back to my trauma therapist and said to her, something's still not right. And since then, she'd done more training in trauma. So we had a chat, and she said, you've got complex PTSD as a result of your upbringing. And that like really blew my mind, because had you asked me before what was your upbringing like and your home life, I would have said, well, it was a mixed bag. It was complicated. You know, there's lots about my family that I really enjoy. And there have been some more tough times as well. And I think that's true of many families, probably the majority.
Yeah, that's exactly how I look at it too. You know, it was good and bad.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. So it was a big surprise, but then it helped me to make sense. And since then, I've done so much studying around it and learned loads about sort of different sort of applied psychology, healthy relationships, all kinds of different things. And it really helped me to kind of develop my own body of work, which is why I got into particularly abuse recovery. And because that was so much harder to spot. And I think when you've got like simple PTSD, that to me felt so awful. But in terms of how it was treated, was much quicker. Whereas,
well, and I think a lot of it is because with simple PTSD, you know, like you were saying, it's because of a situation that you can easily pinpoint and be like, oh, that is exactly why I'm feeling this way right now. where as far as complex PTSD, it might take a while for you to talk to someone like a therapist or a coach or whoever to really figure out exactly what is causing your feelings at that time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because now that I know it and I've done so much work on it, I've still got some different things of my own that I'm still kind of in process with, but I would say the majority of it is dealt with. And but it's so much harder to pinpoint when people, I get a sense of it when people, my clients and stuff describe to me their upbringing and how they feel now. It's really easy for me to say, I'm pretty sure we're talking about complex PTSD here. But before I had the experience of it and was able to identify it in myself, I found that much harder to recognize. So I think until you're already, I guess, in treatment for it, it's hard to pinpoint because it's about how you feel around other people and how you behave. So people pleasing, people make jokes about it and it's talked about a lot more. But that often comes from a place of trauma, having a lot of nightmares, getting involved with the wrong people, often being taken advantage of, or being in one-sided friendships, relationships of any kind. We're more looking at the symptoms. It's kind of, not to be too clinical about it, but it's often how people are presenting that we can make a good guess, I think. But I think if you've come from a household where it originated from, you don't know any different. You don't know what it's like to have relational health and to be in really safe, really healthy relationships with other human beings. So how would you know that you had it unless someone like me tells you? You probably do.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. The way we're raised, it tends to be the way that we live, and it's amazing when you can stop and look at your life, think about what you want, and realize that the path you're on or the path that your family has always been on isn't what you want, and you can slowly start to make changes in your life. And a lot of people, they'll say, I can't do this. I can't do that. My family doesn't do that. And it's all limiting beliefs that we have. And, I look at limiting beliefs as something that I can challenge now. I've become aware. So whenever I have one come up in my life, I can stop and think about it and be like, okay, where is this coming from? Who told me this? Or who told me I can't do that? Or who told me that my family, let's just say, can't go to college or whatever. I've heard a lot of people say that. Well, no one in my family has ever gone to college, so I can't go to college. It's like, but you can. Like, how will you be the first one? So I think it's important for people to not only become aware of their limiting beliefs, but to also work through them and figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. And something I found really helpful is I think sometimes there's a tendency to try to gloss over these things with positivity, and actually wherever that comes from, whether it's pain or fear or limiting beliefs, where that comes from, there's actually some really important wisdom in there somewhere. I'm a real fan of something called IFS, which is internal family systems. And it's really fascinating. It's the idea that whatever pops up in you in any kind of given situation, especially if you've noticed it, it's normally coming from somewhere that has a really positive intention, but often that part, so say for example, a really common one is people being afraid of raised voices. They might hear a raised voice and instantly be on high alert. They're scared that there could be arguments or violence, and they instantly feel unsafe, even if it's in a neighbour's garden and it's just maybe children shouting because they're playing. You know, it could be anything. And so I'll give an example. If somebody came to me with this fear, then it could look like we ask that part that's scared to come up in the body, and we start to connect with that part that's scared, and we'll often ask questions like, you know, what is it that you're scared of? Why are you worried about raised voices? What does it mean? And we begin this dialogue with that part, and it's often it's a subconscious thing. So often what pops up is just true, or true for that part of you. And something that I love doing this every time. You ask that part, how old do you think we are? And usually the answer is usually in the single digits, maybe teens, most of the time. And so then I'll say to the client, I want you to tell this part how old you actually are. And the client will say, oh, I'm actually 40 something. And this little younger part that might be only 5 years old is like, wow. And just even having that conversation, that part is like, oh, I'm not on my own and there's an adult here. And often then the conversation looks like the client saying to this younger part of themselves, like, you know, I now live in my own home and I'm safe, and I've got my own family, or it's me with my pets, or whatever it might be. And often just that conversation, that younger self is like reassured and like, oh, I don't have to worry about this anymore. And that in itself can be really healing and amazing, and actually allows that part of your brain or whatever it is to relax and to realize that they don't have to operate in that way to protect you anymore. And I just think that's really magical.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's awesome that you talk about them, because just before this recording, I was on a call with one of my clients who's in school for psychology and becoming a therapist, and you know, we're exchanging, you know, what we do. So I'm their coach and they're my therapist right now. You know, just so we each can get practice and learn and grow, and you know, because it's always good to, when you learn something, if you can teach it or use it, it really helps you. But I want, you know, what I like about what you said about, you know, asking yourself how old you are is, you know, they asked me to think about, you know, when I was a child, how would I deal with, let's say, frustrations that I'm currently dealing with. And then also, they asked me if I were to, you know, talk to my 8-year-old self, who was in the same situation, what would I say to myself as a child coming from me as an adult? And that was something that really like opened my eyes. I was like, whoa. Like, it really helps you realize like where you are, and your problems aren't as big as you think they are. You know, you can definitely work through them. That's kind of what I got out of it.
It's really profound. And I think there's this idea, particularly in our sort of very similar societies, that once you're a child, you're done. And then once you're a teenager, you're done. Once you've done, you know, this idea that it's in the past now. And that's not how our brains work. Our brains do not do that.
No.
We bring forward so much. Yeah. Pretty much everything. I
Yeah.
mean, I've, my ADHD means I forget things all the time, so it's probably in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it comes with us and it shapes us. And I think there's so much of our history that's embedded in our behavior without us even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
And then a lot of times, usually the negative situations that happened as a child that we carry with us our whole life, and we actually identify ourselves because of that situation. And with the clients I've worked with, and we've been able to discover what that is. And you literally have to discover, because a lot of times it's so like unknown to you that you are still carrying this thing with you. You don't even realize it. And then once you can pinpoint, like with a coach, with a therapist, whoever, once you pinpoint that situation, it's like the biggest aha moment of your life. And then you're like, holy crap, I can change, because that situation should not define who I am now. And I think that's always huge, and I love working with people, and it's always a very emotional situation where we're talking and we figure that out, but the after effect is always incredible.
yeah.
So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I've heard so many adults say things like, I'm still really haunted by this thing my teacher said to me when I was 7,
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
my sibling or my parents just made this one comment this one time, and it was so insignificant, but I can't stop. Like, it plays in my head all the time, and I feel like so silly. I feel so
Yeah.
kind of embarrassed that it still bothers me, and I'm like, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
that stuff forms like such a core memory in us, and it really affects our programming.
Yeah. It's 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 awesome that you say that, because like through my journey in self-development and improving myself, I started to really think about, you know, the the things that happened as a child that I still carry with me, like we are just saying. And one of those things that I want to give an example is a couple, well, probably not even, probably 2 years ago now. I realized that I had this thing with books where I was so careful to not wreck a book in your word. Like, I, I would set it down gently, I'd carry it like it was glass. When I turned the pages, I was super careful. And one day I was like, why? Like, these are my books that I bought. Like, why am I? Like, yes, I want to take care of them, but I want to use them, and they're not, they're gonna get abused and whatever. It's like, what's happening here? And I was able to figure out why I felt that way. And that was because when I was in, I think, third grade, my music teacher handed out a book to the whole class, like your musical book that has all the songs in it, whatever. And she would not give me a book. And when I asked her for a book, she said, no, you don't get one. And I said, why? She said, because I don't want you to wreck the book.
Wow.
And that literally carried with me my whole freaking life. I'm 32 years old now, so, up until I was 30, I literally was kind of scared of books, and like it's good to take care of your things, but it's like, so once I figured that out, I literally destroyed a book on purpose, just kind of stick it to her.
That's amazing. That would
Yeah.
have been so good if you'd have like filmed it and showed it to her, like forced her to
I
read
know. Yeah, it was just like when I finally realized why, I was just like, holy crap. That was in third grade, and in third grade, what, 7, 8 years old? Like, wow. So yeah, it's just the things that we tend to carry
Yeah,
into our adult life is truly remarkable and sad a lot of times.
yeah. A lot of times it is. I think the one thing I want to say about that is that I think once you've processed it, and it sounds like you did an amazing job realizing and then being like, I'm going to do the opposite. That's so cool.
Yeah.
But I talk so much about trauma, and I share my own story in interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And people often say, "Oh, it must take a lot of bravery," and I'm like, honestly, no. I think by the time I think it's two things. I think the first thing is that when you've had really good kind of treatment and you're largely recovered, it just
Mm-hmm.
feels like you're talking about something that it's not like it didn't happen to you, but you just don't feel that emotional about it anymore. Or the only
Yeah.
emotion I do feel when I look at my younger self is just love. There isn't really anything horrible, like emotionally left in there. And then
Mm-hmm.
also the second thing, I just don't have a filter. So I think it's probably in my personality to kind of just say everything and not worry about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely right there with you. I mean, now that I'm, what people like to call an influencer online, it's like I really started to watch what I say, because before I didn't have a filter at all, and I still don't to a point, but you always gotta be respectful. So I think it's important to, voice your opinion, but also be respectful of others, because
I agree.
you don't know what other people are going through. So the way you're looking at a situation could be completely different from the way they look at it, but that doesn't make either one of you wrong. It's just you have different perspectives on things.
Yeah, for
So.
sure. My early online life was in the sort of intersectional space. So I
Mm-hmm.
still have that space, but mostly it's for fun now, just posting silly memes and stuff. Um, but yeah, I think it's one thing to not have a filter, and it's another thing to be inconsiderate. So
Yeah, I agree.
there's it's really funny actually. My sister met her husband over 10 years ago, and they've lived together for a long time, and so she's not kind of been around myself and our much younger brother and our family so much. Obviously she sort of visits, but she hasn't lived there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And my mum, she walked up to me wearing a new outfit and didn't say anything. She just sort of did the gesture at whatever she was wearing at me,
Mm-hmm.
and I just said no, and she was like, okay, thanks. And she walked off, and my sister witnessed this whole thing. She was like, I can't believe you just did that. And I was like, it's totally
Mm-hmm.
consensual. My mum, she knows that she's going to get an honest answer, and it's not a judgment. She asked for my opinion, and she knows that I'm going to be honest, and I've got
Mm-hmm.
a good eye for stuff like that. As does she, to be
Mm-hmm.
fair. But it's always difficult when it's you, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a really big difference between being unfiltered and
Mm-hmm.
being an a-hole. I think there are a lot of
Yeah.
people out there who are like, I'm just being honest. But I think there's
Yeah.
a really good saying that it's not honesty without kindness, and it's not kindness without honesty. And I really like that.
I like that too. Yeah, that's awesome. So this has been really great, and my slogan is "Your abilities are infinite." What does that mean to you?
I love that. I agree. I think we are capable of so much. And I think, coming from a kind of the background that I've come from and my point of view, I think we're capable of a huge amount when two things happen. It's so typical. Like I'm sitting here being all non-binary now. I'm like, I'm going to come up with two things.
I like it. Let's go.
Yeah. But I think one thing is getting to do things in a way that suits you. I think you can go a lot further when it suits you and it honors who you are and the way that you need to operate to be most comfortable and most, well, maybe not always comfortable, but most aligned and to play to your strengths. And the other thing I think is community. I think we all need a little bit, not everybody's got a million friends or wants a million friends, and some people might only have one or two really good ones. But I think having community and support is really, really vital. So I think it's both us and it's a team effort. So yeah, that's what I think of when you say that.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. That was awesome. So how can people work with you and how can they find you?
Start with my website. It's mx, which is mx, harrishill.com. I've got a short curated audiobook list for folks who've survived difficult families and, abuse and challenging relationships and a bunch of other stuff on there. So go there and sign up to my mailing list as well.
Awesome.
So, yeah, thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, I will. Yeah, it has. I'll put your links in the show notes.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too. This was really, really awesome. If you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and share it on your Instagram story and tag me in the Nick Heart. Also, go ahead and share it anywhere else that you see fit, because the only way that I can grow this is by you guys sharing it. I don't sell anything on here. I don't have any sponsors, so let's just get it out there by word of mouth and help more people. Alright, everyone, remember, your abilities are infinite.